The morning sky over New York burst into colors as 7 massive ships broke through the clouds. They were smooth, silver discs that seemed to float rather than fly. People stopped in the streets, cars halted, and the world held its breath. After decades of wondering if humans were alone in the universe, the answer had arrived. Similar scenes played out across the globe: London, Tokyo, Moscow, Rio, Cairo, and Sydney. The alien ships hovered silently, waiting. In the Pentagon's Emergency Command Center, Major Jack Walker stood with his arms crossed, watching the largest screen as it showed live footage from around the world. "Major Walker," General Phillips said, "you've been selected." Jack turned to face his superior. "Selected for what, sir?" "To meet them. The President and the UN Security Council agree. Your background in both military tactics and diplomatic relations makes you our best choice." Jack's face remained calm, but his heart raced. 42 years old with graying temples and eyes that had seen 3 wars, he never imagined becoming humanity's first ambassador to an alien species. "When do I leave?" he asked simply. "They've requested a representative in 1 hour, at Central Park." The alien who greeted Jack introduced himself as Commander Tiro of the Vex Exploration Fleet. He stood slightly taller than a human, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer under the sunlight. His eyes were large, entirely black, and he had no visible nose, just small slits where one would be. "Major Walker," Tiro said, his voice surprisingly warm and clear, "we are honored to finally meet the people of Earth. We have observed your planet for some time." Jack nodded respectfully. "The honor is ours, Commander. Humanity has long wondered if we were alone." Tiro smiled. At least Jack thought it was a smile. "Not only are you not alone, but you are invited to join a community of civilizations that spans this arm of the galaxy." Over the next 3 weeks, the world changed faster than anyone could have imagined. The Vex shared technologies that promised to end disease, hunger, and energy shortages. They spoke of peace, cooperation, and a new age for humanity. But something bothered Jack. Small inconsistencies in Tiro's explanations. The way the alien guards watched humans with what looked like contempt. The areas of their ships that remained off-limits. "You worry too much," said Dr. Lisa Grant, the lead scientist working with Vex technology. "Look at this medical scanner they've given us. It can detect cancer at a cellular level. They're helping us." Jack picked up the small device. "Have we taken one apart? Do we understand how it works?" Lisa sighed. "Not completely, but that's to be expected. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." "That's my point," Jack said. "We're accepting gifts we don't understand." 1 month after first contact, Jack was invited aboard the Vex mothership for what Tiro called a special announcement. As his helicopter approached the massive vessel hovering over the Atlantic Ocean, Jack couldn't shake the feeling of dread growing in his stomach. The inside of the ship was stunning, flowing architecture that seemed almost alive, lights that adjusted to match human comfort levels, and gravity that felt perfectly normal despite being generated artificially. Tiro led Jack to a large chamber where several other Vex waited. They were dressed in more elaborate clothing than the ones Jack had met on Earth. One of them, wearing a red sash, stepped forward. "Major Walker, I am High Commander Nex of the Vex Dominion. Your species has been most cooperative in our evaluation process." Jack straightened. "Evaluation process. I was under the impression we were establishing diplomatic relations." Nex made a sound that might have been laughter. "Diplomatic relations are for equals, Major. Your species is remarkably primitive. Then why offer us technology? Why pretend to?" "We do not consider it pretending," Tiro interrupted. "The devices we provided served 2 purposes. They delivered the promised benefits while simultaneously mapping your cities, monitoring your communications, and analyzing your defensive capabilities." The cold realization washed over Jack. This was never about friendship. "Correct," Nex said. "Though we find your species fascinating, You are also unpredictable and dangerous. The Vex Dominion has determined that humanity requires management. Before Jack could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. One of the walls transformed into a viewing screen, showing major cities around the world. Jack watched in horror as smaller Vex ships, hundreds of them, descended from the motherships. Beams of intense blue light shot downward, and buildings began to crumble. People ran through streets as dust and debris filled the air. "What are you doing?" Jack lunged toward Nex, but invisible forces held him in place before he could take 3 steps. "Removing your capacity to resist," Nex replied calmly. "Military installations first, then government centers, then communications networks. Quite standard procedure, really." Jack struggled against the invisible restraint. "You won't get away with this. Humans don't surrender easily." "Yes, we've noticed that unfortunate trait in your historical records," Tiro said. "It is precisely why we determined this approach was necessary. Your species values freedom over stability. You fight amongst yourselves constantly. You would never accept guidance willingly." On the screen, Jack saw the Pentagon take a direct hit, then the White House. Similar scenes played out with government buildings in other countries. "You've been planning this from the beginning," Jack said, his voice hollow. "Of course," Nex replied. "We never make first contact without a complete conquest strategy." Jack closed his eyes, not wanting to watch more destruction, but Tiro grabbed his chin and forced him to look. "Observe, Major Walker. Your world is being remade. In time, humans will serve a useful purpose in the Dominion. The resistant ones will be removed. The compliant ones will be rewarded. Order will replace chaos." Jack watched as the world he knew disappeared in fire and smoke. His training told him to stay calm, to survive, to find a way to fight back. But for now, all he could do was watch. "Take him to detention," Nex ordered. "He will be valuable in understanding human psychology." "And Major," he added as guards moved toward Jack, "consider your position carefully. Those who assist the Dominion can have comfortable lives." As Jack was dragged away, he turned back to meet Nex's black eyes. "Remember this moment," Jack said quietly. "Remember that you didn't just attack our cities. You created enemies who will never forget or forgive. And that will be your downfall." The last thing Jack saw before being removed from the chamber was Earth burning on the view screen, and Tiro's dismissive gesture that said clearly, "Humans might talk bravely, but their defeat was already complete." Little did the Vex know, they had just awakened something they had never truly understood: humanity's capacity for revenge. 3 years passed like a slow nightmare. Jack Walker wiped sweat from his forehead as he swung his pickaxe into the rocky wall of the mine. His once neat military haircut had grown long and wild, and his formerly clean-shaven face now carried a thick beard streaked with gray. A thin metal collar around his neck blinked with a steady green light, the Vex control device that would shock him if he stopped working or went somewhere forbidden. "Water break," called out a female voice behind him. Jack turned to see Anna Reed approaching with a small container. Once a top NASA scientist, Anna was now just another prisoner in the Vex mining colony called Outpost 7, a frozen moon circling a gas giant far from Earth. "Thanks," Jack said, taking a careful sip. Water was rationed strictly. Anna glanced around to make sure no Vex guards were nearby. "Ben didn't come back from processing yesterday." Jack's face hardened. Ben Morrow had been a civilian engineer before the invasion, and one of the few friends they had made in this hellhole. Processing was what the Vex called it when they took humans away for their experiments. No one knew exactly what happened, but most never returned. "That's the 3rd one this month," Jack whispered. "They're taking more of us than before." Anna nodded, her once bright eyes now dull with exhaustion, but still carrying a spark of intelligence. "I think I know why. Come to my bunk after shift. I have something to show you." The prisoners' quarters were little more than metal boxes stacked 3 high, each barely big enough for a thin mattress and a small storage container. The Vex believed that uncomfortable prisoners were less likely to cause trouble. They were wrong. Anna pulled a small, flat stone from beneath her mattress. To Jack's surprise, she pressed her thumb against it, and tiny lights flickered across its surface. "What is that?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "A data tablet I built from parts I stole from the processing center when I was cleaning there last month." Anna's eyes gleamed with pride. The Vex don't think we're smart enough to understand their technology. Another mistake they're making. Jack looked at the small device with new respect for Anna. "What's on it?" "Everything I could download in the few minutes I had. Guard patrol schedules, facility maps, communication protocols." She paused, her voice dropping even lower. "And something else, something about us, about humans, that the Vex are afraid of." Jack leaned closer. "Tell me." "They can't read our minds," Anna said simply. Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" "The Vex use a kind of mind-scanning technology on all the species they conquer. It lets them detect rebellion before it happens. But human brains—" She smiled for the first time in months. "Our brains have some kind of neurological structure that blocks their scans. We're the only species they've encountered with this trait." Hope, an emotion Jack had nearly forgotten, stirred in his chest. "So they can't tell what we're planning?" "Not entirely. They can monitor our actions, our words, our behavior patterns, but our actual thoughts remain private. That's why they're increasing the processing. They're trying to figure out how to break through." Jack ran a hand through his tangled hair. "This changes everything, Anna." "There's more," she said, tapping the tablet again. "I've been mapping the guard patrol patterns. There's a 7-minute window every third cycle when the path to the shuttle bay is completely unguarded." Jack looked at her with new eyes. The tired prisoner was gone, replaced by the brilliant scientist she had once been. "Are you suggesting what I think you are?" Anna's face was deadly serious. "I'm saying we have a chance, Jack. A small one. But we need a distraction." 2 weeks later, their opportunity came. A shipment of new prisoners arrived. Humans captured from a resistance group that had been hiding in the mountains of what was once Canada. The entire outpost was busy processing them. "Now," Jack whispered to Anna as they worked in the mess hall, washing dishes after the evening meal. "Tell the others. 30 minutes." Anna nodded and slipped away. Over the past 2 weeks, they had carefully shared their plan with 10 other prisoners they trusted. Enough to create chaos, not enough to risk exposure. Exactly 30 minutes later, the first explosion rocked the facility. Tom, a former demolitions expert, had created a crude bomb from clinging chemicals in the maintenance bay. As alarms blared, prisoners began running in all directions, some genuinely panicked, others following the plan. "This way," Jack called to Anna as guards rushed toward the explosion site. They ran in the opposite direction, toward the small shuttle bay where supply ships docked. 2 guards appeared in their path. Jack didn't hesitate. 3 years of rage fueled his attack as he tackled the first guard, while Anna grabbed the shock baton from the second and used it against him. Jack quickly stripped the fallen guard of his weapon and communication device. "Let's move." They reached the shuttle bay just as another explosion sounded from the opposite side of the facility. The second distraction, right on schedule. A small Vex transport ship sat on the landing pad, its ramp down. "Can you fly it?" Jack asked as they raced up the ramp. Anna grinned. "I've been studying their control systems for months. It won't be pretty, but I can get us out of here." Jack sealed the ramp while Anna went to work on the controls. Alarms screamed across the outpost as the engines hummed to life. "They're locking down the bay doors," Anna shouted. Jack found what looked like weapons controls and hit them without hesitation. Energy beams shot from the ship, blasting the bay doors. The gap was small, but it might be enough. "Hold on," Anna yelled as she pushed the ship forward, scraping through the damaged doors and into the freedom of space. Behind them, Outpost 7 grew smaller. Jack knew the Vex would send pursuit ships, but for this moment, The first moment of freedom in 3 years. He allowed himself to feel something close to joy. "Where to?" he asked, strapping himself into the co-pilot seat. Anna's hands flew over the controls. "I downloaded all the data I could about other mining colonies. There are at least 7 more, all with human prisoners." Jack nodded, understanding immediately. "We start building our army." He found the communication system, and on a channel he knew would reach all Vex frequencies, broadcast a simple message. "This is Major Jack Walker of Earth. To all humans who can hear this, we are not defeated. We are not broken. Remember Earth. Remember what they took from us. And know that we're coming for you. And then we're coming for them." As the ship accelerated into the darkness, Jack looked at Anna. "They have no idea what they've started, do they?" Anna shook her head. "They think they know us based on their studies, but they missed the most important thing about humans." "What's that?" Jack asked. "We never forget, and we never, ever forgive." The ship jumped to faster than light speed, carrying with it the first real spark of resistance, and the beginning of the Vex's worst nightmare. 5 years after escaping Outpost 7, Jack Walker stood at the viewport of what his people now called Haven, a massive asteroid they had hollowed out in a dense field where Vex scanners struggled to penetrate. His reflection showed a man hardened by years of fighting, with a long scar running down his right cheek from a close encounter with a Vex patrol. "General Walker," a voice called from behind him. "The new ships are ready for inspection." Jack turned to face Mike, a young man who had been just a teenager when they rescued him from a labor camp 2 years ago. "I told you to stop calling me General." Mike grinned. "The people need a leader with a title, and you've earned it." Jack sighed but followed Mike through the carved stone corridors of Haven. What had started with a single stolen ship had grown into something no one could have imagined. They now had over 500 humans living in the asteroid base, and a growing fleet of ships, some stolen, some built from salvaged parts. The large cavern that served as their hangar was bustling with activity. 3 Vex ships sat in various stages of modification, their sleek lines now bristling with additional weapons and equipment. Anna Reed stood next to one of the ships, directing a team as they installed what looked like a new kind of engine. When she saw Jack, she handed her tablet to an assistant and walked over. "What do you think?" she asked, gesturing to the ships. "We've replicated the cloaking system on all 3. They can now hide human brainwave patterns from Vex scanners for up to 72 hours. Jack nodded approvingly. "Your work is amazing, Anna. 5 years ago, we were swinging pickaxes in a mine. Now we're building a fleet that can actually hurt them." Anna's eyes shone with pride, but there was something else there too, a hardness that came from years of fighting for survival. "I have something else to show you." In the lab. Anna's lab was a marvel of human ingenuity. Equipment salvaged from a dozen different sources had been repurposed, modified, and combined in ways the Vex would never have imagined. "We had visitors yesterday, while you were on the raid," Anna said, activating a holographic display. "Not human." The image showed 3 beings unlike any Jack had seen before. One appeared to be made entirely of water, held in a roughly humanoid shape by a thin force field. Another looked insectoid, with a hard exoskeleton and multiple limbs. The third was crystalline, with light pulsing through its transparent body. "What are they?" Jack asked, studying the images carefully. "Allies," Anna replied. "Or at least potential allies. They call themselves the Mera, the Krell, and the Lithians. Each of their worlds was conquered by the Vex before they came to Earth." Jack's eyes widened. "How did they find us?" "They've been hiding and watching, just like we have. When we started hitting Vex supply ships, they noticed. It took them 2 years to track us down." Anna's face grew serious. "Jack, they say the Vex have conquered dozens of worlds. We're just the latest." Jack studied the strange beings more carefully. "Can we trust them?" "I think so. They hate the Vex as much as we do. Maybe more." The Vex have been controlling their worlds for over a century. A century of oppression. Jack could hardly imagine it. What do they want from us? To join forces. They have knowledge about Vex systems and weaknesses that we don't. And they're interested in our ability to resist Vex mind scanning. They think if we work together, we might actually have a chance to fight back. Not just raid and hide, but really fight. The meeting took place in Haven's largest chamber. Jack sat at a table with Anna and their top lieutenants, facing the 3 alien representatives. Despite years of fighting the Vex, Jack still felt a moment of unease facing truly alien beings. The water creature spoke first, its voice creating ripples across its liquid surface. "I am Tidal, speaker for the Mera. We have watched your attacks on the Vex. You fight differently than any species we have encountered." The insectoid creature clicked its mandibles. "I am Skitter of the Krell. Your tactics are unpredictable, chaotic. The Vex cannot calculate your movements." The crystal being pulsed with light as it spoke, its voice sounding like chimes. "I am Facet of the Lithians. We bring knowledge of Vex technology. You bring the spirit of resistance. Together, we may accomplish what none could alone." Jack looked at each of them in turn. The Vex took everything from us. Our world, our freedom, our future. We don't fight for glory or power. We fight because we remember what they did. And we will never stop until they pay for it. The 3 aliens exchanged looks that Jack couldn't quite interpret. "This concept of revenge is not common among our peoples," Tidal said. "We fight to regain freedom. You fight because you will not forgive." "It is fascinating." "And powerful," added Skitter. "The Vex do not understand it. They cannot predict actions based on such emotion." Facet pulsed with bright light. "We have intelligence about a major Vex operation. A supply depot near what you call Mars. It contains technology and resources that could help our cause." Jack leaned forward, instantly interested. "Tell me more." 1 month later, Jack stood on the bridge of the largest ship in their fleet, a former Vex cruiser they had renamed Vengeance. Around it flew 5 smaller ships, each carrying a mixed crew of humans and their new alien allies. "All ships report ready," Anna said from her station. "Cloaking systems active." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of what they were about to do. This would be no simple raid. This would be a statement. The first coordinated attack against a major Vex installation. "Send the message to all ships," Jack ordered. "Operation Payback begins now." The small fleet moved silently toward the massive Vex supply depot orbiting Mars. Security was heavy, but they had planned for that. The Mera provided water-based stealth technology that confused Vex sensors. The Krell brought their knowledge of Vex security protocols. The Lithians offered crystal technology that could disrupt Vex communications. As they approached the outer defense perimeter, Jack thought about how far they had come. From a single stolen shuttle to this moment, the real beginning of the war to take back their worlds. "For Earth," Jack said quietly. "And for all the worlds they took." The first shots fired, brilliant streaks of energy slicing through space toward the unsuspecting Vex facility. The element of surprise was complete. As alarms blared on the Vex station and defense ships scrambled, Jack gave the order for the second phase of the attack. On every Vex communication channel, a message began to play, repeated in every language of every conquered world. "The Vex Empire has fallen. You just don't know it yet. We are coming. We remember what you did. We will never forgive. We will never stop." The message that would soon spread fear throughout the Vex Empire had a simple signature: "From humanity, with love." The successful raid on the Vex supply depot had changed everything. In the 3 months that followed, the Resistance, now calling themselves the Alliance, had grown stronger by the day. New ships, new weapons, and most importantly, new hopes spread through the ranks. Jack stood in the command center of Haven, looking at the holographic map of the Mars colony. Once a promising human settlement, It had been transformed by the Vex into a massive harvesting operation. Thousands of humans were held there, forced to work in terrible conditions. The intel from our last raid confirms it, Anna said, pointing to several structures on the map. The Vex are using Mars as their main processing center for Earth resources, and as a laboratory for their experiments on humans. Jack's jaw tightened. How many of our people are held there? At least 10,000, Anna replied. Maybe more. Mike, now Jack's trusted lieutenant, shook his head. It's too heavily defended. Even with our new ships and allies, a direct assault would be suicide. Jack studied the map more carefully. Then we don't attack directly. We use what the Vex don't understand about us. Which is? Mike asked. Jack smiled grimly. Patience, sacrifice, and the human talent for making the impossible possible. 2 weeks later, a small Vex patrol ship detected an unusual energy signature near Phobos, one of Mars' moons. When they investigated, they found a damaged human vessel drifting in space, its life support systems failing. The Vex commander ordered the ship captured and its crew taken to the Mars colony for processing. This was standard procedure. All human technology was to be studied. All humans interrogated for information about the growing resistance. What the Vex didn't know was that the 4 humans they captured, Jack, Anna, Mike, and Tom, had allowed themselves to be taken. Hidden beneath their skin were microscopic communication devices developed by the Lithians, undetectable by Vex scanners. Prisoner processing complete, announced the mechanical voice as Jack was pushed into a large cell already crowded with humans. His hands were bound with energy cuffs, and a control collar had been placed around his neck. Standard Vex procedure. Jack looked around the cell, making eye contact with several people who subtly nodded. The message had spread ahead of their arrival. The Mars resistance was real, and they were ready. That night, when the Vex guards were at their minimum, Jack pressed his tongue against the roof of his mouth in a specific pattern, activating the hidden communication device. Phase 1 complete, he whispered, knowing his words would be transmitted to the Alliance fleet hiding on the far side of Phobos. We're inside. Beginning Phase 2. Outside the Mars colony, hidden by the combined cloaking technologies of the Mera, Krell, and Lithians, 5 Alliance ships moved silently into position. On the bridge of the lead ship, now commanded by title of the Mera, tension was high. Human tactics are strange, Skitter of the Krell commented, his mandibles clicking nervously. To allow your leaders to be captured. It is their way. Facet of the Lithians responded, crystal body pulsing with light. They call it leading from the front. Their warriors follow not because they must, but because they believe. Signal received, called out a human technician. General Walker has confirmed they're inside and beginning Phase 2. Title's watery form rippled with what might have been anxiety. Then we proceed as planned. All ships, prepare for synchronized attack on my mark. Inside the Mars colony, chaos erupted precisely at midnight. In 6 different sections, small explosions damaged power systems, communication arrays, and security doors. Alarms blared as Vex guards rushed to contain the situation. In the confusion, Jack and his team made their move. The control collars, which they had spent weeks learning how to disable, fell from their necks. The energy cuffs, vulnerable to a specific frequency that Anna had discovered, deactivated with a soft click. Now, Jack shouted, and the cell erupted into action. Prisoners overpowered the few guards who came to investigate, taking their weapons and freeing more humans. Jack led one group toward the command center, while Anna headed for the power core. Mike and Tom each took teams toward the landing bays and weapon systems. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. Jack called out to the growing army of freed prisoners. We're fighting for Earth, for everyone the Vex have ever hurt. They think they know us. They think they can predict us. Let's show them how wrong they are. A cheer went up from the humans as they surged forward, years of suppressed rage fueling their attack. In orbit around Mars, The Alliance fleet began its attack the moment Jack's signal came through. The Vex defense ships, suddenly forced to deal with attacks from both inside the colony and from space, were caught in disarray. Their command structure is breaking down. Tidal observed as the Vex ships moved in seemingly random patterns. They cannot adapt to multiple simultaneous threats. The humans call it shock and awe, Facet explained. They attack not just the body, but the mind. On every Vex communication channel, the same message played on repeat. Humans never forget. Humans never forgive. The battle for the Mars colony raged for 3 days. The Vex, unused to an enemy that would sacrifice and endure so much, struggled to counter the human tactics. When they adapted to one approach, the humans would change to another. When they thought they had contained one threat, 3 more would appear. On the 4th day, as Jack fought his way to the main control room, an announcement echoed through the Vex communication system. Attention all Vex forces. This is Admiral Cero of the Vex High Command. I have been dispatched with the battlecruiser Dominion to resolve the situation on Mars. All forces will fall under my direct command upon my arrival in 26 hours. Jack smiled grimly as he heard the message. The Vex were sending their best, a sign that they were truly frightened. He activated his communication device. All teams, we have a new deadline. We need to secure the colony before reinforcements arrive. Anna's voice came back, breathless but determined. The power core is ours. I've locked out all Vex control systems. Landing bays secured, Mike reported. We're bringing in our people now. Weapon systems under our control, Tom added. We're turning their own defenses against the remaining Vex ships. Jack looked out a viewport at the red Martian landscape, the first piece of familiar territory that humans had reclaimed in 8 long years of occupation. Send word to all Alliance ships, he ordered. Mars is nearly ours, but our real fight is just beginning. As the Dominion approached, Jack knew they faced their greatest test yet. But for the first time since the invasion, humans were standing on their own soil, looking up at the stars not as prisoners, but as warriors ready to take back what was theirs. Let them come, Jack whispered. We'll be ready. 1 year after the liberation of Mars, the war had changed dramatically. What began as a small resistance had grown into an interstellar revolution. Dozens of worlds had risen up against their Vex overlords, inspired by the human victory on Mars. Anna Reed stood on the bridge of the Alliance flagship, now named Freedom, looking at the tactical display. Since Jack's presumed death during the battle with the Dominion, she had reluctantly stepped into his role as leader of the human forces. Admiral Reed, a young officer said, approaching with a data tablet. The Krell fleet reports 3 more Vex outposts have surrendered without a fight. Anna nodded, still not used to her new title. That makes 17 this month. The Vex are running scared. The battle that had claimed Jack's life had become legendary. When Admiral Cero arrived with the Dominion, the newly liberated Mars colony had seemed doomed. The massive battlecruiser had technology far beyond anything the Alliance possessed. In a desperate move, Jack had led a small team to board the Dominion while Anna coordinated an attack from outside. They had succeeded in sabotaging the ship's main weapons and engines, but the Dominion's self-destruct sequence had activated. Jack had ordered his team to evacuate, while he stayed behind to ensure the ship moved away from Mars before exploding. His last words over the comm had been simple. Remember why we fight. No one had seen him since, and the Alliance had moved forward, carrying his memory as a banner. "Ma'am," called out the communications officer, interrupting Anna's thoughts. "We're receiving a strange signal. It's coming from deep within Vex space." Anna frowned. "Put it through." A burst of static filled the speakers, then cleared to reveal a voice Anna had never expected to hear again. "Alliance ships, this is Jack Walker. Authentication code Sierra Tango 794. I am alive, and on the Vex homeworld. Repeat, I am on the Vex homeworld." The bridge fell silent. Anna's heart pounded in her chest. "Jack," she whispered. Then, more firmly. Verify authentication. The computer confirmed what seemed impossible. It was really him. Jack, how? We thought you were dead. Where have you been? What happened? His voice came through, weaker now. No time to explain. I've discovered something critical. The Vex High Council is preparing a final solution against all rebellion. You need to bring the fleet here. Now. To the Vex homeworld. That's suicide. Anna protested. Trust me, Jack's voice urged. I've disabled their main defensive grid. You have a 48-hour window. I'm sending coordinates. The transmission cut off abruptly. Mike, now Anna's second-in-command, shook his head. It could be a trap. Anna stared at the coordinates on the screen. It's Jack. I know it is. And if it is, Tidal added, his watery form rippling with excitement, this could be our chance to end the war completely. Anna took a deep breath. Signal all Alliance ships. We're going to the heart of the Vex Empire. 3 days later, the largest fleet ever assembled outside of Vex control entered the home system of their oppressors. More than 200 ships from a dozen liberated worlds moved in perfect formation toward the gleaming blue-white planet that had spawned the empire that had caused so much suffering. As Jack had promised, the outer defense grid was offline. The few Vex ships they encountered seemed confused, disorganized. Something's wrong, Anna said, studying the tactical display. This is too easy. Look, called out an officer, pointing to the main view screen. A massive structure was visible in orbit around the Vex homeworld. A ring-shaped station that pulsed with energy. That wasn't in any of our intelligence reports, Mike said. Before Anna could respond, a familiar voice came over the comm system. Alliance fleet, hold position. This is Jack Walker. A small shuttle launched from the ring station, heading toward the Alliance flagship. When Jack walked onto the bridge, Anna could hardly believe her eyes. He was thinner, with new scars, and his left arm had been replaced with what looked like Vex technology. But his eyes still burned with the same determination she remembered. Jack, she started, then found herself unable to continue. He smiled briefly, then turned serious. There's no time. I need to tell you what I've learned. The bridge crew gathered around as Jack activated a holographic display. When the Dominion exploded, I was captured by a secret faction within the Vex. Scientists who disagreed with the High Council's policies. They kept me alive because they were fascinated by humans. During my captivity, I discovered the truth. The hologram showed Earth and several other planets. The Vex didn't attack Earth because they thought we were dangerous. They attacked because they were afraid. Their predictive models showed that of all the species they had encountered, humans would eventually surpass them. Our adaptability, our creativity, our capacity for both compassion and violence. It terrified them. Anna stared at the display. So all of this, all the suffering, was because they were scared of what we might become. Jack nodded grimly. And now they're even more afraid. That ring station is their final solution. A weapon designed to send a pulse that will kill any being with our specific neural pattern. Not just humans, but any species that could potentially evolve like us. How long do we have? Mike asked. Hours, at most. But I've infiltrated their systems. I can get us to the High Council chamber. Jack's eyes met Anna's. This ends today, one way or another. The final battle was fought not with massive fleets, but with a small strike team. Jack led Anna, Mike, and representatives from each allied species through the corridors of the Vex Central Command. The confusion Jack had created in their systems allowed them to reach the High Council chamber with minimal resistance. When they burst through the doors, they found 7 Vex leaders huddled around a control panel. At their center stood Commander Tiro and High Commander Nex, the same Vex who had overseen Earth's invasion 8 years earlier. Walker, Nex said, his black eyes widening in what might have been fear. You should not be here. You remember me, Jack said, stepping forward. Good. I want you to remember the face of the species you tried to destroy. Turo moved protectively in front of the other council members. You cannot stop what has been set in motion. The pulse will activate in minutes. Jack smiled coldly. Actually, I already stopped it. While I was your guest, I learned more about your systems than you ever intended. The pulse has been recalibrated. Nex made a sound of disbelief. Impossible. If it activates now, Jack continued, it will affect only Vex neural patterns. Your entire species, wiped out in an instant. Poetic, don't you think? The council chamber fell silent. But, Jack said, his voice softer now, that's the difference between us. You attacked out of fear. We fight for justice. The pulse has actually been disabled completely. Your fate is now in your hands. Anna stepped forward to stand beside Jack. Surrender. Withdraw from all conquered worlds. End your empire, or we will end it for you. Nex looked from Jack to Anna, then to the representatives of the other species. What he saw in her eyes seemed to finally make him understand. We surrender, he said, his voice barely audible. 3 months later, Jack and Anna stood on a hillside overlooking what had once been Chicago. The rebuilding had begun, but Earth's recovery would take decades. Do you think they'll honor the agreement? Anna asked. Jack watched as a group of children played in the distance, the first generation that would grow up free. They will, he said confidently, because now they understand what they should have feared all along. Not our technology or our resources. He smiled. It was our memory, our resolve, our ability to rise from the ashes. And most of all, our capacity for both revenge and mercy. As the sun set over the scared but healing Earth, Jack took Anna's hand. The universe had changed forever, and humanity had led the way. Not just in how to fight, but in how to forgive when the fighting was done. Admiral Jack Wilson stood alone at the podium, facing the United Earth Defense Council. His weathered hands gripped the edges of the display controller as he prepared to reveal his life's work. Behind him, a large holographic display showed only darkness, waiting for his command. Distinguished members of the council, thank you for your time today, he began, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. What I'm about to show you will change the course of human defense strategy forever. With a simple gesture, the display lit up. A massive ship materialized in the hologram. Unlike anything the council had ever seen, instead of the sleek, practical designs that characterize modern spacecraft, this vessel seemed to bend in ways that hurt the eyes. Parts of its hull curved at impossible angles, and sections appeared to overlap with themselves in defiance of basic geometry. Councillor Patel, the head of the engineering division, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. What exactly are we looking at, Admiral? This is the Thunderclap, Wilson replied, pride evident in his voice. A new class of battleship that utilizes gravity manipulation technology in ways we've only theorized until now. The room filled with murmurs. The alien representative from the Orion Alliance, Ambassador Trell, clicked his mandibles in what humans had learned was a sign of disbelief. Wilson continued, undeterred. The Thunderclap operates on principles that allow it to locally alter the fabric of space-time. This gives it unprecedented maneuverability, and more importantly, lets it generate and control sound waves in the vacuum of space. That's impossible, stated Dr. Martin, Earth's leading physicist on the council. Sound cannot propagate through vacuum. It's a basic law of physics. Wilson smiled. Conventional sound waves can't. But when you manipulate gravity fields to create compression waves in the fabric of space itself, you can generate effects that function essentially the same as sound, but with devastating consequences for enemy vessels. He tapped his controller, and the simulation began to run. The holographic thunderclap moved in ways that made several council members look away, uncomfortable with how their brains struggled to process the ship's movements. Then it released what appeared to be expanding rings of distortion. When these rings contacted enemy ships in the simulation, the vessels simply came apart, their hulls peeling open like fruit. What you're showing defies multiple laws of physics, Dr. Martin said, her voice rising. You cannot manipulate gravity with this level of precision without exotic matter, which we have no means of producing in quantity. Wilson nodded, as if he had expected this exact objection. That's what makes the thunderclap revolutionary. We've developed a new method of creating stable exotic matter using modified particle accelerator technology. The math checks out. He projected a series of complex equations onto the screen. Ambassador Trell rose from his seat, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of extreme agitation. I have reviewed thousands of species weapon systems in my role as military liaison. What you propose is not merely advanced, it should be impossible given humanity's current technological level. The room grew tense. Wilson had expected skepticism, but the outright dismissal in the alien's tone stung. With all due respect, Ambassador, Wilson replied, humans have a habit of achieving the impossible. 20 years ago, we were told faster than light travel was centuries beyond our reach. Yet here we are, with a fleet of FTL ships. General Reed, the head of military operations, had remained silent until now. What are the power requirements for this vessel? She asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer wouldn't be feasible. Substantial, Wilson admitted. The ship would require 3 times the output of our largest current reactors. But we've designed a new fusion containment system that... Enough, interrupted Counselor Pottle. Admiral Wilson, while we appreciate your creative thinking, what you're proposing would cost more than our entire fleet modernization budget. And that's assuming the physics even work, which multiple experts are telling us they don't. Wilson felt his chance slipping away. I understand your concerns about cost, but consider the strategic advantage. 1 thunderclap could replace an entire battle group. Dr. Martin shook her head. It's not just about cost, Admiral. Your equations make assumptions that contradict established physics. The gravitational manipulators would tear themselves apart before achieving the effects you're describing. The Council voted almost immediately. The decision was unanimous, except for General Reed, who abstained. Project Thunderclap was denied funding, and Wilson was invited to take early retirement. 3 months later, Wilson cleared out his office at Earth Defense Headquarters. 30 years of service reduced to 2 small boxes of personal items. As he placed the last of his awards into the box, his office door slid open. "They're making a mistake," said Lieutenant Tom Miller, Wilson's most loyal assistant. The young officer stood awkwardly in the doorway, clearly unsure if he should be there. Wilson smiled sadly. It wouldn't be the first time humanity has rejected a good idea because it seemed too impossible. "What will you do now, sir?" Instead of answering directly, Wilson reached into his pocket and pulled out a small data crystal. The complete designs for the thunderclap. All my research, simulations, everything. He held it out to Miller. The lieutenant took the crystal hesitantly. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because officially, I'm giving up. Retiring to a quiet life on my brother's farm in New Zealand." Wilson's eyes hardened with determination. "Unofficially, I've secured private funding from some forward-thinking investors. We have access to an abandoned lunar shipyard that's been forgotten since the war." Miller's eyes widened. "Sir, that's against regulations. Building unauthorized military hardware is exactly what we're going to do," Wilson finished for him. "I'm not asking you to join me, Tom, but I am asking you to keep that data safe. If I succeed, I'll contact you. If I fail," he shrugged, "then I'm just a crazy old man who couldn't accept that his big idea was impossible." Miller straightened his posture. "When do we start, sir?" Wilson grinned. "Already recruiting personnel. Scientists and engineers who believe in the project but were afraid to speak up against the Council. We leave next week." As they walked out of Earth Defense Headquarters together for the last time, Wilson looked up at the stars, barely visible through Earth's atmosphere and light pollution. "They say it's impossible," he said quietly, "but they'll change their minds when they see it in action. And when the thunderclap speaks, everything will be very, very loud." 3 years passed since Admiral Wilson's forced retirement. The stars looked different from the lunar surface, brighter and more numerous without an atmosphere to dim their light. Wilson stood at the viewport of the hidden shipyard, his reflection showing a man who had aged more than just 3 years. His hair had gone completely white, and deep lines marked his face. Behind him, the impossible was taking shape. "Power test successful, Admiral," called out Dr. Fiona Gray, the physicist who had quietly believed in his theories, even when she publicly had to deny them. "The gravity manipulators are operating at 87% efficiency." Wilson nodded without turning from the viewport. "Not good enough. We need at least 95% to maintain field stability during weapon discharge." A young engineer named Robert joined them, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "The problem is in the containment rings. The exotic matter is putting more strain on them than we calculated. Then we rebuild the rings," Wilson said simply. "Again." Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden blaring of an alarm. The main screen in the command center flickered to life, showing Tom Miller, now Commander Miller, his face grim. "Admiral, we have a situation." Miller's voice was tight with tension. "The hegemony has launched a major offensive against our colonies in the Ta-CD system." The hegemony, a coalition of 3 aggressive alien species who had formed an alliance 5 years ago, had been making threatening moves along the borders of human space. Until now, they had limited themselves to small raids and diplomatic bullying. "How bad?" Wilson asked, though he could already tell from Miller's expression. "Bad, sir. They hit 6 colonies simultaneously. Orbital defenses were overwhelmed within hours. The Council has dispatched the 3rd Fleet, but—" Miller hesitated. "But what, Commander?" "Reports suggest the hegemony has deployed a new type of shield technology. Our weapons are barely making a dent. The 3rd Fleet is taking heavy losses." Wilson closed his eyes briefly. Despite his disagreements with the Council, those were still his people dying out there. "Keep me informed, Commander. And be careful what information you share with me. I don't want to compromise your position." Miller's face hardened with resolve. "With respect, sir, if the hegemony keeps advancing at this rate, my position won't matter much longer." The screen went dark, leaving the lunar team in silence. Dr. Gray spoke first. "How long until the thunderclap is ready?" Wilson turned to face the half-built ship visible through the massive inner window of the command center. It hung in the center of the shipyard, parts of its hull seeming to fade in and out of visibility depending on the angle, an effect of the experimental materials used in its construction. "At our current pace, 6 months, minimum." Robert shook his head. "The colonies don't have 6 months. Ta-CD is only 12 light years from Earth. If they've broken through there, then we work faster," Wilson said firmly. "Double shifts. I'll call in more favors, get more funding." 1 month later, the situation had grown desperate. The 3rd Fleet had been all but destroyed. The 1st and 5th Fleets had been combined and sent to make a stand at the Alpha Centauri system, humanity's oldest and most populated colony. Commander Lisa Reed, who had once abstained from voting against Wilson's project, now found herself in command of what remained of Earth's home defense fleet, a collection of older vessels and training ships that wouldn't stand a chance against a determined hegemony attack. She sat alone in her office aboard the station Sentinel, reviewing the latest casualty reports when her aide entered. "Commander, you have a visitor. He says it's urgent." Reed looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "Who is it?" "Commander Tom Miller, Mom." Reed's expression changed. Miller had been Wilson's assistant. After Wilson's retirement, Miller had taken a position in intelligence, and their paths rarely crossed. "Send him in." Miller entered, looking tired and worried. Without preamble, he placed a data crystal on her desk. "What's this?" Reed asked. "The location of humanity's best hope," Miller replied. "Admiral Wilson didn't give up on the thunderclap. He's been building it in secret." Reed's eyes widened. "That's highly illegal. He could be court-martialed." Only if we survive long enough to hold courts-martial, Miller countered. The hegemony broke through at Alpha Centauri yesterday. The combined fleet is in retreat. We have maybe 2 weeks before they reach Earth. Reed picked up the crystal, turning it in her fingers. Is it real? Does his ship actually work the way he claimed it would? I don't know, Miller admitted. I've been feeding him information and helping redirect resources when I could, but I haven't seen the ship myself in months. Last I heard, they were having stability issues with the main weapons system. Reed was quiet for a long moment. As the acting head of Earth's defenses, she was breaking multiple regulations by even considering this. But Miller was right. At this point, what did they have to lose? Have my ship prepared, she ordered. Tell no one where we're going. The journey to the lunar shipyard took only hours. Reed's ship, a small fast corvette, approached the dark side of the moon, where Wilson's facility was hidden within a crater. As they came around the rim, Reed gasped. Suspended in the middle of the crater was the thunderclap. And it was complete. The ship defied conventional description. Its hull seemed to bend light around it, creating a distortion effect that made it difficult to focus on any single part of the vessel. Portions appeared to overlap with themselves, creating impossible geometries that hurt the eyes to look at directly. It's beautiful, Reed whispered, despite herself. Their ship landed in a small docking bay. Wilson himself was waiting for them, looking surprised to see Reed. Commander Reed, he said, straightening his posture out of old military habit. I wasn't expecting anyone from Defense Command. The situation has changed, Admiral, Reed replied. The hegemony has broken through at Alpha Centauri. Earth is next. Tell me honestly, does your ship work? Wilson's expression was grim but determined. The gravity manipulators function. We can create the spatial distortions necessary for both defense and offense. But we haven't been able to test the weapons system at full power. The energy requirements are enormous. Will it fight? Yes, Wilson said without hesitation. But I can't guarantee it will survive its first battle. Reed looked past him to where the impossible ship hung in the void. At this point, Admiral, survival is a luxury we can't afford to worry about. The Council needs to know about this immediately. Wilson nodded slowly. Then it's time for the thunderclap to make some noise. As they turned to leave for Earth, Reed took one last look at the ship. For the first time in weeks, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council was more chaotic than any meeting in its 50-year history. Counselors shouted over each other, while holographic displays showed the advancing hegemony fleet. The alien armada had pushed past the ruins of humanity's defenses at Alpha Centauri and was now approaching Mars. We have less than 48 hours before they reach Mars orbit, General Peters announced, his voice cutting through the noise. The remaining ships of the combined fleet will make their stand there, but realistic projections give them no chance of success. Counselor Patel slammed his fist on the table. Then what do you suggest, General? Surrender. Before Peters could answer, the doors to the chamber slid open. Commander Reed entered, followed by Admiral Wilson. The room fell silent as faces registered shock and confusion. Admiral Wilson, Council President Alvarez said, recovering first. This is unexpected. You retired 3 years ago. Wilson stepped forward, his back straight despite the weight of the years. Retired is a polite way of putting it, Madam President, but that's not important now. What matters is that I have a ship that can stop the hegemony. Murmurs swept through the room. Dr. Martin, who had been one of Wilson's harshest critics, laughed bitterly. Your impossible ship, the one that defied the laws of physics. Please tell me you're not wasting our time with this fantasy when we're facing extinction. Reed stepped forward. It's not a fantasy. I've seen it. She activated a holographic projector, showing footage of the thunderclap suspended in the lunar shipyard. Many counselors flinched or looked away, uncomfortable with how the ship's strange geometry affected their perception. You actually built it, Dr. Martin whispered, her academic curiosity momentarily overriding her skepticism. "Against direct orders," noted General Peters. "That's a court-martial offense." "Court-martial me after I save Earth," Wilson replied evenly. "The thunderclap is ready for deployment. All I need is your authorization." President Alvarez studied Wilson carefully. "Even if this ship works as you claim, one vessel against an entire fleet, those are impossible odds." "With respect, Madam President," Wilson said with a small smile, "impossible is what the thunderclap does best." After a tense debate, the Council voted. This time, the decision was far from unanimous. But with Earth's survival at stake, even the skeptics couldn't afford to ignore any potential weapon. The thunderclap was authorized for immediate deployment to Mars. As the Earth grew smaller behind them, Wilson stood on the bridge of his impossible ship. Around him, a crew of just 50 operated stations that pulsed with strange energies. These were the true believers, scientists and engineers who had worked in secret for 3 years to bring his vision to life. "Gravity manipulators at full power," reported Dr. Gray from her station. "Field integrity is stable." Wilson nodded, his eyes on the main view screen that showed Mars growing larger ahead of them. Beyond the red planet, the sensors detected the massive hegemony fleet, over 200 ships advancing in perfect formation. "Time to arrival at Mars?" Wilson asked. "At conventional drive speeds, 10 hours," replied the navigator, a young man named Ryan. Wilson's lips curved into a slight smile. "Let's show them what the thunderclap can really do." "Activate the spatial displacement drive." Ryan looked nervous but excited. "Yes, sir. Calculating fold parameters now." On the view screen, space itself seemed to bend around the ship. Stars stretched into lines, then swirled into a dizzying pattern that no human mind was meant to comprehend. There was a moment of vertigo so intense that several crew members clutched their stations for support. Then, suddenly, Mars filled the screen. "Spatial jump complete," Ryan announced, his voice filled with wonder. "We're in Mars orbit. Travel time: 3 minutes, 17 seconds. Wilson allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The first test of the ship's revolutionary drive had succeeded. Conventional ships would have taken hours to cover the same distance. "Send a message to Earth Defense Command," he ordered. "Tell them the thunderclap has arrived at Mars. We're engaging the enemy." On the bridge of his flagship, Hegemony War Commander Krell watched the approaching human fleet with contempt. Their pitiful remaining forces had gathered around the red planet in a desperate last stand. His sensors counted just 37 ships, most of them damaged from previous battles. "Pathetic," Krell growled to his second-in-command. "They should have surrendered when we offered terms." "Commander," called the sensor officer, his voice betraying confusion. "I'm detecting an anomaly near the human fleet." "Specify," Krell demanded. The officer adjusted his instruments. "Unknown. It appears to be a ship, but the readings make no sense. It's as if parts of it exist in multiple locations simultaneously." Krell's 6 eyes narrowed. "A sensor malfunction. Run diagnostics." "Diagnostics show all systems functioning normally, Commander. The anomaly is real, and it's moving." On the main view screen, a strange distortion appeared. It seemed to slide through space rather than fly through it, leaving visual echoes in its wake. As it approached, Krell felt an unfamiliar sensation: doubt. "Open a channel to all ships," he ordered. "Target that anomaly with all weapons. I want it destroyed before it gets any closer." Aboard the Human Defense Fleet's command ship, General Mason watched in disbelief as the thunderclap materialized seemingly from nowhere. "What in God's name is that?" he whispered. His tactical officer shook her head in wonder. "According to transponder codes, it's registered as an Earth defense vessel. The thunderclap." Mason's eyes widened. Wilson's ship, the one that was denied by the Council years ago. Before the officer could respond, their communication system activated. Admiral Wilson's face appeared on screen. "General Mason," Wilson said with a nod of respect. I suggest you move your fleet to a safe distance. What's about to happen might affect your ship's systems." Mason bristled at being ordered around. "This is still my operation, Admiral. I need to know what your ship is capable of before I reposition my forces." Wilson's expression softened slightly. "What it's capable of, General, is saving Earth. But the physics involved in its operation are disruptive. I'd hate for your crews to experience the side effects firsthand." Something in Wilson's tone convinced Mason. He gave the order, and the human fleet began pulling back. The hegemony fleet launched its first volley. Hundreds of energy beams and projectiles streaked toward the thunderclap. Wilson watched calmly as they approached. "Gravitational defense field now," he ordered. Around the ship, space itself seemed to fold. The incoming fire didn't hit shields as it would with conventional vessels. Instead, the weapons' fire bent around the thunderclap, curving away in impossible trajectories. Some shots actually looped back toward the ships that had fired them. On the hegemony flagship, Krell watched in growing alarm as his fleet's most powerful weapons proved ineffective. "Impossible," he snarled. "Nothing can deflect concentrated fire from 200 ships." His sensor officer's voice was strained. "Commander, the anomaly is changing configuration. It appears to be preparing to what?" Krell demanded. The officer looked up, fear evident in his eyes. "I don't know. There's no reference for this in our database." Aboard the thunderclap, Wilson gave the order they had all been waiting for. "All power to the sonic gravity projectors," he said calmly. "Prepare to make some noise." "Sonic gravity projectors at full charge," reported Dr. Gray, her voice tight with tension. "Field integrity holding at 93%. Wilson nodded. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of years of work, ridicule, and secret development. No one had ever attempted to weaponize gravity waves at this scale. Theory said it would work. Simulations said it would work. But reality often had other ideas. "Target the lead hegemony vessels," Wilson ordered. "Start at 10% power. Let's see how they respond before we commit fully." Ryan, at the weapons console, entered the commands with steady hands despite the pressure. "Targeting complete. Sonic gravity projectors ready at 10% power." Wilson took a deep breath. Fire. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The thunderclap hummed slightly, and faint ripples appeared to distort the space around it, visible only as slight bending of the starlight behind the ship. Then the ripples expanded outward. Unlike conventional weapons, there was no beam, no projectile to track. Just expanding rings of distorted space, moving at incredible speed toward the hegemony fleet. When the first ripple reached the nearest enemy vessels, the effect was subtle but immediate. The ship shuddered as though struck by an invisible hammer. Warning lights flashed across the thunderclap's bridge as feedback data streamed in. "Effect confirmed," Ryan announced, excitement creeping into his voice. "Enemy shields are fluctuating. Their power systems are experiencing harmonic disruption." Wilson allowed himself a small smile. "Increase to 30% power. Let's turn up the volume." On the bridge of his flagship, War Commander Krell struggled to maintain balance as the deck seemed to vibrate beneath his feet. Warning sirens blared throughout the ship. "What is happening?" he demanded, his voice nearly drowned out by the cacophony of alarms. His science officer worked frantically at his station. "Unknown weapon type. It's generating some kind of wave effect. The waves are creating resonance patterns in our hull materials and shield generators." "Resonance?" Krell snarled. "You mean sound. In space." "Not sound exactly," the science officer replied, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and scientific fascination. "But functionally similar. The human vessel is somehow creating compression waves in space-time itself. These waves are propagating through our ships regardless of shields." Another, stronger wave hit the fleet. This time, smaller hegemony vessels began losing control, spinning as their stabilizers failed. On several ships, hull plates began to vibrate so intensely that they tore free, venting atmosphere into space. Krell slammed his fist on the communication panel. All ships, evasive maneuvers, spread formation. Target that human vessel with everything we have. But as his fleet tried to respond, a third wave hit, stronger than the previous two combined. Aboard the Thunderclap, Wilson watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The hegemony fleet was in disarray, their tight formation broken as ships tried to escape the expanding gravity waves. "Damage report on enemy vessels," he asked. Ryan checked his readings. Significant structural damage to approximately 40% of their fleet. Their smaller ships are suffering the worst effects. The wavelength seems to match their hull resonant frequencies perfectly. Dr. Gray looked up from her station, her expression concerned. "Admiral, the projector cores are heating faster than we anticipated. We're seeing microfractures forming in the containment rings." Wilson frowned. They had known this might happen. Creating these gravity waves put enormous strain on the ship's systems. "How long can we maintain current output?" "At 30% power. Maybe 20 minutes, Gray replied. "But that won't be enough to disable their larger vessels." Wilson studied the tactical display. The Hegemony flagship and its escort of heavy cruisers remained largely unaffected by the gravity waves. They were regrouping, preparing to counterattack. "We need more power," he said decisively. "Increase to 60%. Gray's eyes widened. "Sir, at that level, we can't guarantee the containment rings will hold. If they fail, we lose this ship," Wilson finished for her. "If we don't stop that fleet, we lose Earth. The choice is clear." He turned to Ryan. 60% power. Target their flagship group." Across the solar system, something unprecedented was happening. As the Thunderclap increased its power output, the gravity waves grew stronger and began to affect space itself in unexpected ways. On Earth, scientists at the Gravitational Wave Observatory were the first to notice. Their detectors, designed to measure the tiny ripples in spacetime caused by distant cosmic events, suddenly went off the scale. "This can't be right," one researcher said, checking and rechecking the readings. "It's like someone's playing a massive bass drum in space." Similar effects were reported across every human and alien settlement in the system. On Mars, colonists felt the ground tremble beneath their feet. On Jupiter's moons, liquid water beneath icy crusts sloshed violently in massive waves. And throughout space, all communications were overwhelmed by a strange, pulsing interference that, when played through speakers, sounded like an immense, deep rumble, as if the void itself had found its voice. Everything was loud. The Thunderclap's bridge shook violently as the gravity projectors pushed past 60% power. Warning lights flashed at nearly every station. Containment rings at critical stress levels. Dr. Gray shouted over the deep, resonant hum that permeated the ship. Field integrity dropping to 82%. On the view screen, the effect on the Hegemony fleet was devastating. The gravity waves now carried enough energy to tear ships apart. The compression and expansion cycles created by the weapon stressed metal to its breaking point. Over 30 enemy vessels had already been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. But the Hegemony flagship and its 5 largest cruisers were still coming, pushing through the waves with their more robust construction. "They've adapted their shields," Ryan reported. "They're using counter-resonance to dampen the effect." Wilson grimaced. The Hegemony's technological adaptability was impressive, even in these circumstances. "How much more power can we give the projectors?" he asked. Gray's face was grim. "We're already past the safety limits. The exotic matter in the core is becoming unstable. If we push harder..." A violent shudder ran through the ship, cutting her off mid-sentence. Sparks showered from one of the engineering consoles. "Containment Ring 3 has failed," called an engineer from the back of the bridge. "Automatically rerouting through rings 1 and 2, but they won't hold for long." Wilson made his decision. "Divert all power from non-essential systems. Prepare for maximum output." "Sir," Ryan said hesitantly, "at maximum output, the simulations predict catastrophic system failure within minutes." "Then we have minutes to end this," Wilson replied. "Maximum power. Target their flagship directly." On the human defense fleet's command ship, now positioned safely behind Mars, General Mason and his crew watched in awe as the impossible battle unfolded. "My God," whispered Mason as he witnessed entire hegemony ships crumple like paper toys under the assault of invisible forces. His communications officer turned with a shocked expression. "Sir, we're receiving reports from Earth, Luna, Mars, everywhere. The gravity waves are affecting the entire system. They're registering as far out as Neptune." Mason stared at the distant thunderclap, barely visible except for the strange distortions surrounding it. "Wilson, what have you created?" he murmured. Just then, the thunderclap seemed to pulse with a new intensity. The distortion field around it expanded dramatically, and a final massive wave rippled outward. When it reached the remaining hegemony ships, there was no gradual effect. The ships simply came apart, their molecular bonds overcome by the precisely tuned gravity differentials. The flagship, over 2 kilometers long, split into 3 sections before each section disintegrated further. In less than 30 seconds, the pride of the hegemony fleet was reduced to scattered atoms. But the thunderclap was glowing now, its hull radiating an unnatural light as systems overloaded throughout the vessel. Mason watched in horror as secondary explosions bloomed across Wilson's ship. "Get me a channel to the thunderclap," he ordered. Now, Admiral Wilson gripped his command chair as the thunderclap shuddered violently around him. Warning sirens blared from every station on the bridge, and emergency lighting flickered on as primary power systems failed throughout the ship. "Status report," he shouted over the cacophony of alarms. Dr. Gray worked frantically at her console, which sparked and smoked. "Containment systems failing across the board. The exotic matter is destabilizing. We have minutes at most before total system collapse." Through the view screen, Wilson could see nothing but empty space where the hegemony fleet had been moments before. They had done it. The impossible ship had achieved the impossible victory. But the cost would be high. "All hands to escape pods," Wilson ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Initiate emergency evacuation protocols." As the crew rushed to obey, the communication system crackled to life. General Mason's face appeared on screen, concern evident in his expression. "Wilson, what's happening over there? Your ship is lighting up our sensors like a solar flare." "Nothing to worry about, General," Wilson replied with a grim smile. "Just the price of progress. The hegemony fleet is destroyed, but I'm afraid the thunderclap won't be joining your victory parade." Mason's expression turned serious. "We're dispatching rescue ships now. Can you stabilize?" "Negative," Wilson interrupted. "The exotic matter core is destabilizing. When it goes, you don't want anything nearby. Keep your distance. We're evacuating now." The transmission cut off as another system failed. Wilson turned to find Dr. Gray still at her station. "Doctor, I believe I ordered an evacuation," he said. She didn't look up from her work. "Someone needs to maintain the containment fields as long as possible to give the pods time to clear the blast radius." Wilson moved to stand beside her. "Then we'll do it together." 3 days later, Earth celebrated. The news of the thunderclap's victory had spread throughout human space, bringing hope where there had been only despair. The remaining hegemony forces, learning of their main fleet's destruction, had retreated to their own territory. In the Grand Hall of the United Earth Defense Council, a very different meeting was taking place than the one 3 years ago, when Wilson had first presented his impossible design. This time, Wilson sat at the center of the table, his right arm in a sling, a small price to pay for the last-minute escape from the thunderclap before its final collapse. President Alvarez addressed the assembled counselors and military leaders. "Today we honor the courage and vision of Admiral Jack Wilson and his crew. Against all odds, and indeed, against our own skepticism, they created a weapon that saved humanity from certain defeat." Applause filled the room. Wilson nodded in acknowledgement, but his expression remained serious. When the applause died down, Dr. Martin raised her hand. The physicist who had once been Wilson's harshest critic now looked at him with newfound respect. "Admiral, I believe we all owe you an apology for dismissing your theories, but now we need to understand exactly how the thunderclap worked. The science behind it could revolutionize not just our defense systems, but our understanding of physics itself." Wilson exchanged glances with Dr. Gray, who sat beside him. They had discussed this moment during their recovery. The thunderclap worked by temporarily altering the fundamental constants of physics within a localized field, Wilson explained. By manipulating gravity at the quantum level, we created a bubble where sound, or something very much like it, could propagate through space. He activated a holographic display showing complex equations. However, there's a reason why the ship was considered impossible. The energy requirements are enormous, and the exotic matter we use to power the systems is inherently unstable. The thunderclap was never meant to be a permanent vessel. It was designed for a single decisive battle. Murmurs of surprise and disappointment spread through the room. "Are you saying we can't build more?" General Peters asked, frowning. "Not exactly," Wilson replied. "We can build improved vessels incorporating some of the thunderclap's technologies, but they'll need to be more limited in scope, more focused in their application of these principles." He nodded to Dr. Gray, who activated another display showing designs for smaller, more streamlined ships. "These vessels won't be able to create system-wide effects like the thunderclap did, but they'll still be far more advanced than anything we, or the hegemony, have deployed before." President Alvarez studied the designs thoughtfully. "How soon can production begin?" "We've already prepared the specifications," Wilson said. "With proper funding and support, the first new ships could be operational within a year." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the news of the thunderclap's impossible victory spread quickly among alien civilizations. On the hegemony homeworlds, the ruling council faced an unprecedented crisis. "Our entire main fleet, gone," said War Minister Vex, his voice hollow with shock. "Destroyed by a single human vessel using technology we didn't believe was possible." High Counselor Dren, the leader of the hegemony, stared at the sensor readings from the battle. The data made no sense. It showed violations of what they had believed were immutable laws of physics. "If the humans can build one such ship, they can build more," Dren said gravely. "We must sue for peace immediately, before they develop this technology further." War Minister Vex bristled. "Peace with humans? After centuries of hegemony expansion, you suggest we simply surrender?" "Not surrender," Dren corrected. "Strategic realignment. The humans have demonstrated capabilities beyond our understanding. We need time to study this new technology, to adapt our own sciences." After heated debate, the Hegemony Council voted. For the first time in its 1,000-year history, the hegemony would seek peace rather than conquest. 1 month later, Wilson stood by the viewport in his new office at Earth Defense Headquarters, looking up at the stars. Commander Reed entered, carrying a data tablet. "The diplomatic corps reports that the hegemony peace delegation will arrive next week," she said. "Their message indicates they're willing to discuss very favorable terms." Wilson nodded, still gazing at the stars. "And our new ships. The first prototype begins construction tomorrow. We're calling it the Echo class. Not as dramatic as the thunderclap, but still impressive. Dr. Gray says they've solved the containment problems that plagued the original design." Wilson smiled slightly. "Good. We'll need them." Reed studied him curiously. "You don't think the hegemony truly wants peace?" "Oh, they want peace now," Wilson said, "but only because they're afraid. Once that fear fades, once they believe they've understood and countered our technology." He let the thought hang unfinished. "Then we'll need to be ready," Reed concluded. Wilson finally turned from the viewport. "Humanity has always excelled at achieving the impossible, Commander. Now the rest of the galaxy knows it too." As they walked together toward the meeting where they would plan Earth's new fleet, Wilson reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From ridicule to vindication, from retirement to salvation. They had said his ship was impossible until it appeared. And when it did, everything was loud enough for the entire galaxy to hear. Humanity had found its voice among the stars, and it would never be silenced again.